Chapter 2 The Lookout. Upon the next day, the body of the individual was found mangled and torn to pieces. There was a tall man with a slightly scruffy beard, sat hunched over the decaying mess. His arms were muscular, his eyes shaded with purple rings under them from how many late nights he was working. Knowing this was not the first murder of the town, he patted his star, his golden coiled star, inside. Dusting off his jeans, he turned his heels, letting the spurs spin and jangle. Who could have done this? The sheriff, Arthur McReever, asked as he stood over the scene of the crime. The neighbors cried, as they knew it was their fault for not convincing them to stay. Arthur turned to the couple that had brought the crime to light, along with the large throng of people who gathered round, and asked, "Do you know?" "Yeah, we sure as hell do," Abigail said with tears streaming down her face. "Can you give me a description?" he asked as he held a piece of straw in between his teeth. He was a tall-ass man. Wore a funny hat. It was dark, all right, she said as she buried her face into Ernest's chest. That gives me a lot to work with. Having come up from the other town, he knew that he was going to have a lot of catching up to do. So far, there were a series of murders, but none of which had ever been reported like this. A lot of crime, he should rephrase. Mainly the crimes were petty, horse theft, extortion, and vandalism, along with some undercover blackmail that was reported. Nothing like this. The only other murder was a previous sheriff, but now, this poor soul. "All right, we'll let the janitor take care of it," he said as he motioned for the mortician cart that had pulled up. "Make way for him," he bellowed as the smaller, feebler old man drove the cart along. The man wore a black blazer, bowler cap, red tie, and white gloves. "Thanks for coming so quick," Arthur said as he saw him and offered him a hand out down. "Thank you for the hand, sir," he said as he took it and hopped down. Walking across to the back of the cart, he pulled out his bag of tools and then asked for a hand to get the coffin ready. Arthur kindly obliged and helped the man. The two of them cleaned up the scene and then put the body into the wooden coffin. Not knowing any contacts, they figured it was just another traveler. Pitching it into the back of the cart, Arthur asked the mortician, "Tell me, what do you think could have done this? Because it sure as hell wasn't no six-shooter." "Well, sir, in all my years I've seen burn wounds, but most consisted of them being tied to a stake or hanged, or in a burning building. Out of the middle of an area like this in the dead of night? I can't say I ever have. It's dreadful." He then snapped the reins and the horses took off. After a few hours of running errands around town, he headed back to the jail to see the jailer on duty. "How you been holding up, Mark?" Arthur asked as he leaned along one of the wooden beams. "Not too bad. How about yourself?" he asked as he stared down the prisoner they had in captivity. The man was lanky-looking, wearing a wife-beater. He had his bowler cap and black jacket along with his red tie against a chair. His face was chiseled, his eyes empty, and his mustache was groomed to elegance like status. "You never explained to me who this was," Arthur said as he twiddled his straw between his yellow teeth. "This right here is Marco Silvandia. He's charged with the assumed murder of the previous sheriff. He's the son of the self-proclaimed owner of this town, Louis Silvandia," Marcus Wattenberg said as he twirled the cell key. "So, how was the cleanup?" "One of the more gruesome sights I've seen in my days," Arthur replied as he stared at the man who sat completely still. The food bowl that held a porridge-looking goop sat stone cold by the bars in the jail cell door. Marcus groaned and pointed to it. "Look, buddy, you aren't going to starve yourself skinny enough in time to not get lynched. Might as well eat up. Well, good sir, I don't believe you'll be hanging my boy today, a man said from behind them as a tall, grim-looking pale man walked forward. He was accompanied by the mortician, along with a man with the same kind of clothing the mortician and Marcio were wearing. The man who spoke was none other than Louis Sylvandia. He was thin, tall, lanky, wore a pinstripe suit with a long bill cap that resembled a fedora. It had a red feather and black feather tucked into the side. He carried a black diamond-handled cane with a golden tip. His face was chiseled like his son, but his paper-thin black mustache was to a fine curled line. "And who says so?" Marcus asked, standing up as he clutched the key to the cell in between his fingers. "My good friend Cambridge does," Louis replied, and the other man behind him stared daggers at Marcus. Immediately, Arthur felt on edge as he looked back and forth between Marcus and the other men accompanying Louis and the mortician. He was skinny with his blazer finely fit to his size. He wore black gloves and had a quill in his pocket with a bottle of some black-looking ink along his belt loop. "Does my associate, Mr. Scribe, frighten you, Mr. Wattenberg?" Louis asked with a curled lip. "No. But I want to know just what the hell you think makes me think I'm gonna let this murderer go." "Because there's been another murder in the same fashion while he was incarcerated, Mr. Cambridge. Can vouch for me." "Of course he would," Wattenberg says as he turned around without needing to hear the explanation. The mortician sighed and said, "Last night, we found someone who suffered the same injuries as the previous sheriff. So, I'm afraid that's enough evidence since no one saw Marcio do it. And we have no confirmed evidence for either story." Yeah, save your old breath, old man. Just shut the fuck up and get out of here before you give me a headache," he said as he opened the door, and Marcio was already dressing up with his blazer tie. Once he stood by the four men entourage, Louis tipped his hat and smiled. "Good day, gentlemen." The others tipped their hats, and they all left. Fucking degenerates. Every goddamn one of them. Arthur turned to Marcus with a wary eye. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean that they're in on it. All of them. I swear it. Every time I see one of them damned cretins walking down the street, they're never alone, dressed all nice and neat and flaunting around like they own the place. They're in on something. I know it." Arthur still wasn't sure what he meant. "I think you're a little hostile to someone like that." Turning in his wooden chair, Marcus looked up at him and said, "Look at me in the eye, and tell me you don't get chills when that bastard smiles." Arthur couldn't deny the man's demeanor and confidence was somewhat alarming. It gave him chills by just how pale he looked, like a walking dead corpse. After a while, he left the jail and headed home to his office, and found his door was slightly ajar. Slowly, raising an eyebrow, he withdrew his pistol and entered the house, looking around and scanning the area. He saw everything seemed to be in place, but then found it alarming as he noticed his chair at his table was moved. Walking upstairs to his bedroom, he saw everything was fine and nothing was touched, and began to settle down that he confirmed the house was safe. Going downstairs, he investigated the table and found that there was a letter on it. "Dear Arthur McGreever, please come see me at midnight tonight at the town square. We won't be alone. There will likely be others watching in the event we are in danger. Sincerely, the Lookout." Unsure if this was a trap or not, he figured something was up. He went to bed early and heard the ring of the 11 p.m. nightly toll of the giant clock in the church. Getting dressed, he cooked up some sausage really quick and then loaded his gun. He usually kept one bullet in the chamber because he figured he'd never need all 6, but now he felt on edge and scared. Moving silently, he walked through the moonlight in the empty streets except for a few drunks that were stumbling around making ruckus. When Arthur reached the town square, he noticed it was rather quiet and found it to be eerily unsettling. The mixture of muffled, distant saloon music playing from across the town added to the effect of nerve-wracking feelings. Looking around in the cold night, he saw something, a silhouette in the dark, casted along the clock tower shadows of the church steeple. Pulling his revolver, Arthur called to the man in the shadows. "Come out! And who are you?" Slowly emerging from the darkness was a man wearing a white mask that held two heavily featured eyes that looked like that of an owl, or show of rings underneath the mask, with a straight face. The man looked to Arthur. "Welcome, Mr. McReaver. There isn't much time, but I am the lookout. My job is to keep eyes upon the town. I protect them and watch over those who stand in the way of unseen danger," he said as he bowed. "All right, but who the hell are you?" he asked as he kept his revolver trained on him. "I've already stated my name and occupation. Now come, there's not much time. We need to initiate you into the society before he comes," the lookout said as he offered his hand to him. Arthur was put on the fence, in his mind scared of this individual. "Hold on, explain yourself. What are you doing?" he asked as he kept his gun trained on him. "Mr. McReaver, I know who is behind these murders. He's coming because I've seen his face. I've watched him murder the one this morning, ever since the sheriff was murdered. I've been on the watch ever since his arrival. He is new to this place, and he's going to burn it to the ground," he said as he looked into Arthur's eyes. "What can I do?" he asked, feeling even more frightened. "Follow me. I'll take you to the gallows. It's our headquarters. To get in, pull the third noose, and then head down." The lookout was cut off as a blade pierced his throat from behind. Falling to his knees, he revealed the man standing behind him, perfectly still as the cane protruded from the back of his neck. He was in the shadows of the church tower, so Arthur couldn't see his features, but he could see the hat, his figure, and the cane protruding from the lookout's neck. Raising his pistol and firing at the shadow, he was stunned when he saw he ducked the bullet. The man pulled the cane from the lookout and raised the dragon head handle up and released a blinding hot stream of fire at Arthur's face. Stumbling backwards, Arthur felt the hairs on his eyebrows singe, along with his bushy mustache. The lookout reached a hand up to him, pointing away, as his other hand clasped at his bleeding hole in his neck. Arthur was slightly blind from the bright light, but felt primal instincts kick in, and he began to fire in the direction of the murderer. The assailant moved to his left and knew more people were coming, so he needed to finish his target quick. Stabbing the lookout in the temple, he turned to escape into the shadows of the darkness. Arthur was screaming in panic as he saw the dead lookout and felt a hand placed over his mouth. Muffled, looking up, he saw another masked man, but this mask was black and had white etchings of a sun and a moon pattern over his cheeks, along with a bullet hole in the center of the mask. "Shh," he said as he picked him up and helped him stand. "Follow me. There isn't much time," he said as he pulled out his own gun and made sure they weren't being followed. Heading outside of the town to the gallows, he pulled up the third noose, and a trapdoor opened under the stage. Arthur remained quiet and was slightly horrified. He held the man's hand as he was escorted to a small light at the end of the mine shaft underneath the stage. When they arrived at the door to the end, Arthur gulped. When it opened, his eyes went wide in childlike wonder as he saw what was beyond. "Welcome to Eureka," the man wearing a black mask said as they walked inside.